And joining me now is Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, chairperson and managing director at Biocon, and someone whom the government has consulted on private laboratory testing as part of a panel that she headed on that issue. Ms. Shaw, I appreciate your joining us, and I want to come to that issue of testing because a day after the Supreme Court passed a judgment saying all testing should be made free for coronavirus, you've tweeted saying a judgment that will severely affect testing. Private laboratories cannot be expected to run their businesses on credit. It's humanitarian in intent, but impractical to implement. I fear testing will plummet. Do you really believe that private sector needs to be incentivized to test for corona?
You know, Rajdeep, this is not about incentivizing. I think the private labs have actually come forward on a humanitarian basis because they are doing these tests at cost. And believe me, we have worked very closely with the government to arrive at the pricing. The MRP was actually worked out by ICMR because that is the cost of the test for the government. And that's what they then asked us to operate it at. And without any kind of negotiation, they said, yes, this is a crisis, this is an emergency need of the country, and we will do it. I don't think they are shirking from their responsibility. I think you must understand that, all these labs are very labor-intensive operations. They are giving employment and livelihood to hundreds of people. And I think they have to run their operations. They have to buy kits. They have to basically make sure that they pay their salaries to their employees. They have to they need to run their operations. They can't be expected to do this free of cost. So I think we need to be very, very reasonable about what we are asking of the private sector diagnostic labs. And if you say that you have to do it free, they will have to completely scale down their operations. And what will happen? People will lose their jobs. You will hardly get any kind of testing done in these labs because that's all they can afford. What are we doing? We want to augment testing. You just, came out with a show on how the crisis is mounting in Mumbai. You need to step up the testing. I'm actually glad that the BMC actually has taken a very reasonable stand. They're saying that if the kits are provided by the government, then they will ask the private labs to charge X, and if they don't provide the kits to the private labs, they will pay Y. I think these are times when we must understand that the private sector is being roped in to augment and rapidly scale up testing. Right now, between all the government labs, I think there is roughly about 10 to 15,000 tests being done per day across the country. This needs to rapidly scale up to at least 100,000 to 200,000 tests a day. Without the private sector involvement, this cannot happen because you really need rapid turnaround. And these diagnostic labs in the private sector are set up for rapid throughput.
2 points that come from what you said. Number one, you're saying you need the private sector labs to augment testing, and it has to reach 100,000, 200,000 when we are at the moment around 10 or 12,000 per day in terms of corona testing. Number one, Ms. Shaw, out of a total number of 127,919 tests conducted for COVID-19 till this morning, only about 2,267 tests were done in private labs. So they account for less than 2%. So are they really going to join hands and augment? So they also need to do more, right?
Rajdeep, please get your facts straight, okay? The private labs have just started testing a week ago, okay? And so therefore they need to ramp up. First and foremost, there are so many hurdles being put in the way of private labs. Every state government is putting impediments. So the moment they start testing, the state government say, no, you cannot collect on your own. You will have to wait for samples coming from government hospitals. Now, come on, if you want to speed up testing, then give them the freedom to collect and test. I mean, I think we have to understand that if you need more tests, you need more data. We need to keep expanding the denominator to get into that zone of confidence and safety. If today we just have about 6,000 people who have reported positively testing positively, I'm sure there are many more people who need to be tested and who will be positive. As the denominator increases and the deaths in relative to the denominator reduce, we will be in a much better situation.
I take your point entirely, and I think no one disagrees. We need to test, and test more. The point that I was making is, do you believe that this is caught in bureaucracy at the moment, as you're saying, red tapeism, that it's taking much too long at times for certain states to give the necessary permissions to private labs, ma'am?
Well, many states have been very progressive, Maharashtra being one of them, Karnataka. Everyone is actually supporting the private sector and welcoming the private sector. But I think this is not about just bureaucracy in the state governments. Let me also tell you that the government is all for private labs coming into the fore. It is a faulty Supreme Court judgment. I think that is what has really, thrown the, toppled the apple cart.
There is the Supreme Court judgment, which obviously, therefore, you're saying is oblivious to the ground realities. Now, what I read the petition, and one of the claims the petitioner made was that 5,000 rupees a test was too much. This was profiteering. This would only benefit a few. The wealthy could afford 5,000. What about those living on the margins who are already struggling? They will struggle to go to a private lab. They'll be dependent on government labs. What would you tell the court, which seemed to accept this argument?
First and foremost, it's 4,500.
Right.
That was the capped price. So I think the judge needs to get that fact straight. Secondly, I think the judge should realize that the 4,500 was a price, stipulated by the ICMR, who said this is what it costs the government. So it's not, there is no profiteering. This is at cost. Please understand, Rajdeep, the way tests are done. The tests are done with people in PPEs. The tests are done in a very sophisticated infrastructure with sophisticated, expensive equipment. The tests are done with lab technicians and with other people who are involved in the collection process and the testing process and the administrative process. It is not, how can you ask these small organizations to do things for free? These are not large organizations who have cash reserves. These guys are struggling. They don't even have any diagnostic business at the moment to keep them going. And secondly, I really want to also tell you that, this business of saying, oh, everybody needs free testing. There are, so many government labs who are offering it free. If you were to tell the private sector labs, please do 10% of your, tests free, I'm sure they will agree. But to expect them to do everything free is, I think, very unreasonable, very unfair.
You made a strong point there, and you seem to believe that the Supreme Court judgment in that sense either needs to be reversed or re-looked at or reviewed. Am I correct, ma'am?
Absolutely. I think this is very unfair, uncalled for. I think it's a PIL filed by somebody who doesn't even know the facts. And the judge has basically ruled without even factoring all these aspects.
So therefore, if anyone says it's profiteering, they don't realize the ground situation. The ground situation is test, and test more. And therefore, augment your facilities. 4,500, in your view, is an amount which the ICMR has set after a great degree of thinking.
Yes, and that's what it's costing the government anyway. And the second thing I also want to say is, Rajdeep, I think the judge at the Supreme Court would have been in a better position, it would have been fitting for the judge to have said, okay, those who want to, those who are insured, he should have actually instructed the insurance companies to, give the claims made by insured people to reclaim the cost of the test. Why are they putting it all on the private sector labs? I don't understand.
Ma'am, this brings me to the point that there are a number of issues where fact and fiction seem to be separated. You've seen the pharma sector also very closely over hydroxychloroquine. When India, for example, has decided to reach out to America and Brazil, there were these reports of what will domestic demand do. Now, I speak to a number of domestic manufacturers who say we can cater both to domestic and global demand. Do you feel that these are all opportunities at a time where even the pharma sector can rise to the occasion, just as private test labs can rise to the occasion? And perhaps, we need to start separating the fact from the fiction.
Rajdeep, you're absolutely right. There's too much hype. There is too much disconnect between the fact and what is being talked about. I think the pharma sector is absolutely right when it says it can cater to both domestic need and export needs as well. I think we also must understand that in this emergency-like situation where there is a crisis, we have actually been able to leverage a lot of our capabilities. For instance, ventilators. You know, people have come together to see whether they can actually start ramping up ventilator production. You know that the small company in Mysore that was producing maybe, you know, a few thousand ventilators a month is now ramping up to producing at least 10,000. And they're confident then in a few months they can actually go beyond that and produce maybe 30,000 ventilators a month. Then you've got a company called Agva, which is, you know, in the north, which is also working with Maruti Suzuki. I understand their ventilators are being tested and they also can produce a large number. So I think ventilator production is going to increase substantially. PPEs, I think we are coming out with PPEs in a large way. Masks, you name it, sanitizers. I mean, I think everyone is coming together to make sure that we are in a state of preparedness. But if you expect everyone to do things free of cost, I think it's not fair. Do you think a small company in Mysuru making ventilators must give all the ventilators free? That's not fair at all. I mean, this is a time when we are facing also an economic, pandemic. And at this time, whatever jobs you can keep alive, whatever livelihoods you can actually keep alive, you should be doing that. You shouldn't be asking companies to downsize and, you know, deprive people of livelihood and jobs. I think that's extremely dangerous.
And you think corporate India is ready for this challenge? You think corporate India has recognized that this is a challenge? We know even companies like Mahindra's are planning to get into the ventilator business. Other companies are also looking at opportunities that exist, perhaps not just business opportunities, but corporate social responsibility opportunities.
Look, I think, Rajdeep, the private sector has always, unfortunately, been targeted by civil society and by the media. You know, everything about the private sector is supposed to be about greed and profiteering, which is far from the truth. I think we are the guys who are moving the engines of the economy from, for the country. And I think this is the time when you have also seen corporate sector coming together saying, let's get together and do things. Let me tell you, CSR funds are being used extensively in addressing a lot of the needs of the migrant labor, the downtrodden, the people at the fringes. We are trying to do as much as we can. On the other hand, we are also looking at how do we repurpose businesses and address all these urgent medical supplies. So I think a lot is being done by the private sector, whether it's kit manufacturing, whether it is developing new tests rapidly, whether it is trying to develop a new vaccine. I mean, all this costs money and we are all putting in our own investments to see how we can quickly do that.
So you're actually saying this is a reset time. This is a reset time to get rid of certain old dogmas. This is a time for private-public partnership and for, in a way, a complete rethink of how business can be done in this country.
Look, Rajdeep, business was always done in the right way in the country. We should not be unfair to private sector. That is my contention.
Sure.
I think you always made private sector a whipping boy. I think, the common man or the Aam Aadmi really has deep mistrust of the private sector thanks to even the media. And I think this is very unfair. I think private sector has always risen to the challenge. They've always contributed at a time of crisis. And please don't, make this into a big, blown out controversy, because it is not. I think everyone is trying to do their best.
So final word to you. Do you believe we can reach that 100,000, 200,000 tests per day within the next fortnight if we have the right environment?
Absolutely. I know that we can. We have the capacity, we have the labs, and between the public and private labs, certainly this can be a number, and we should actually be proud of it, because most countries are not able to deliver so many tests a day. And considering the fact that India is such a large country, we need to test at this level. Most countries are actually struggling to test at 10,000 tests a day. And here we are actually doing that level, and we want to actually make it tenfold of that, which I think you should be, commended.
Right. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw ko gussa kyun aata hai? That's the way I think I should put it. It's good to see you putting your views, as always, so frankly. I hope you're listened to, and I do really hope that testing reaches that 150, 200,000 a day limit. That is really what we want. Anything more you want to add? Yes.
Finally, I do want to say that the government is absolutely, aware of our challenges. They are absolutely helping us and enabling us. This is a Supreme Court judgment. This is not a government view.
Sure, taken. The Supreme Court can also get it wrong sometimes. Hopefully, they'll review and listen to what you've just said. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, as always, a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, Preeti Chaudhary here. Hope you like this video. For latest news and analysis, like and subscribe to the India Today YouTube channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated. Thank you for watching.